Approximately 5 years ago, we determined that we would have a course that would explicitly touch the development of the interior life of future peace builders. Soon afterwards, we called it the Peace Builder. Soon afterwards then, increasing awareness of the role of religion in the global world and political theology, we found ourselves saying to our students, given the increasing visible role of religion and political theology as you will find it in the world, if you neglect religion in your social analysis, your analysis will be flawed. The course was Religion, Peace Building's Missing Dimension. Students from the warmongering and peace-building religious extremism course are here this evening. We explore with them the role of religion as we find it every day, noting, as Scott Appleby mentioned many years ago, the ambivalence of the sacred. Elsewhere, the school, our famous Institute for Peace and Justice, gave a wonderful program called Defying Extremism. It's now being taken to different sectors of the world to be shared with others and to enrich our own understanding. The Mexican bishops are understandably on my mind these days, as they are on yours. Pope Francis finishes his visit there. Our Transborder Institute works tirelessly with peace issues, both with the leadership of the Catholic Church and also with various interreligious faith constituencies. As this semester began, we assembled and asked ourselves collectively, what could we do more? And the first we did was give the initiative a new name. We no longer spoke of it so much as extremism, as community resilience against violence extremism. Now for the speakers. On the way back from the public radio interview this morning, where I took our two guests with us, I noted to them a snippet of their biographies that are overflowing with information. What should I say that would be important to them tonight? And the bishop, who's on a steep learning curve as he becomes ever more secure and sure of himself and in charge of things here, said very simply, you want to tell them, Bill, that this is a national assembly. The first time that that's happened. And yet there have been national, regional dialogues that have been going on for a number of years. So with that brief introduction, the rest of his CV you will find on the back of your thing, at least there's more snippet of it. I invite our bishop to come and speak to us.
Boo! Boo!
It's a bad beginning when I can't even find my way to the stage. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, and I want to thank Dr. Harris and all of those, Dean Marquez and Heavy, all those who have worked here with the university, and also Dr. Anthony Sorelli's work from the Bishops' Conference, and all of our Muslim brothers and sisters who helped work to put together this evening. This morning, representatives of the Muslim communities of the United States of the Conference of Catholic Bishops initiated a new level of structured national dialogue with the Muslim community. This dialogue seeks to discern the common themes of faith and truth which unite our two faith communities, and to explore our theological differences in the spirit of mutual esteem, which was the centerpiece of the mandate for dialogue contained in Nostra Aetate, the Second Vatican Council's declaration on the relationship of the Catholic Church with the great non-Christian religions of the world. But as time drew close for us to launch this new initiative of deeper and more structured, more sustained national dialogue between Islam and Catholicism, it seemed that at this particular moment in the history of our nation, we should not have dialogue alone on the theological level. That it would not be a moment of true encounter unless it was complemented by a substantive discussion of the scourge of anti-Islamic prejudice, which is roiling our society and distorting our national political dialogue. Nostra Aetate clearly places at the heart of Catholic-Muslim dialogue a command to work sincerely for the mutual understanding and to preserve as well as promote together for the benefit of all humankind social justice and moral welfare, as well as peace and freedom. Both the Muslim community and the Catholic community in the U.S. have taken tremendous steps to respond to that call during the past 20 years in regional dialogues. This evening's convocation is an effort to move further, more deeply, and in a more committed and sustained way. It is also a moment here in San Diego to take a public stand against the anti-Islamic bigotry, which is all too prevalent among us. My own remarks on this occasion center upon the challenge to the Catholic community in the U.S. to respond to this anti-Islamic moment in our national history in a manner which reflects both the teachings of our church and the historical experience of the Catholic community in America. For in both Catholic doctrine and in our history in the United States, Catholics find a resonance with the experience of the Muslim community in the present moment. The first challenge to the Catholic community is to recognize and confront the ugly tide of anti-Islamic bigotry which has arisen in the United States since 2001. The repeated falsehoods that Islam is inherently a religion of violence, the lie that Muslims seek to establish religious law in place of the constitutional order in the United States, and the assertion that Muslim immigration poses a threat to the cultural identity of the American people should be repugnant to American Catholics, not only because they are a distortion of a great religious faith, but also because they are the same distortions which were hurled against the Catholic community during the 19th and early 20th centuries. We are witnessing in the United States a new nativism, which the American Catholic community must reject and label for the religious bigotry which it is. I want to underscore that it is not bigotry to fear or to combat the violence and terror which some Muslims in the world have unleashed in the name of faith. The families of those killed in San Bernardino, so nearby to us, are a tragic and all too immediate reminder of the need for security in an age where religious fanaticism is present and weapons are all too plentiful. But as a descendant of Catholics from Northern Ireland, I am very aware that Christianity also has often been cited by its fanatical adherents as the foundation for acts of violence and terror which the Lord Jesus Christ would utterly reject and which have sullied the name Christian. Catholics in the U.S. must recognize that extremists have hijacked Islam to promote violence by distorting its fundamental vision. We only accentuate that evil by giving credence to those in the United States who, for political purposes, also hijack Islam and portray it as a threat to our national way of life. The second challenge to the Catholic community in this moment of anti-Muslim prejudice is to actively come to know in greater depth the Muslim community of the United States and the tenets of Islam. One of the great impediments in American society to truly building the society which our founding vision as a nation holds out to us are the residual patterns of social segregation which tend to isolate us within the specific cultural compartments of our daily lives. Some of these patterns are the result of structures of class, race, and geography. Many others flow from the simple human tendency to associate socially with people who share our background, our faith, our culture. As a result of the enduring pattern of social segregation, many, and perhaps most Americans, have no significant, in-depth friendships with Muslims. They have not had the opportunity to come to know in depth members of the Muslim community and their identities as fathers and mothers, as workers facing the economic challenges of daily life, as people of faith in the one God. Religious bigotry thrives in an environment of social isolation. That is why Pope Francis has placed such importance in the notion of encounter in building peace and understanding among religions, peoples, and nations. When we truly encounter men and women of different cultures and faiths, the same issues of parenting, economics, health, aging, stress, failed dreams, and thriving hopes for the future, we can come to understand their cultures and faiths not as threats or as points of alienation, but as elements which enrich their lives and our society. For this reason, it is particularly important for Catholics at this moment of anti-Islamic prejudice in our nation to seek deeper relationships with the Muslim men and women whom we encounter in our work, our neighborhoods, and our schools. Encounter which leads to friendship and thus deeper understanding is the most important antidote to prejudice and bigotry. In addition, it is through interpersonal encounters that Catholics can best come to a fuller understanding of the realities and the beauties of Islam. For it is in the lived faith of Muslim men and women that Catholics will most deeply comprehend the meaning of the Quran. And through such an experience of encounter, Catholics can deepen their own faith in three important ways. The first of these is the role of personal daily prayer in the life of the faithful. The commitment of the Muslim believer to sustained regular prayer, which consecrates each day to God, is a reality which can inspire Catholics to a deeper commitment to our own lives of prayer in a world which erects so many barriers to a regularized and integrated life of prayer. I frequently ponder how much more robust our Catholic faith would be if our discipleship actually included this level of commitment to daily prayer in the Lord. A second treasure of Islam in the life of the faithful is the sense of asceticism as a sign of the sovereignty of God. We have just entered the season of Lent, which is the season of the year especially marked out for Catholics as a time of renewal, reform, and asceticism. 8 years ago, I was traveling through Jordan with a Muslim guide during the month of Ramadan. Every day he traveled with us on grueling treks, while never eating food or drinking water during the day because of his obligation to God. That experience was a far better teacher to me about the depth of Muslim faith than all my study of the texts. Finally, coming to know Muslim men and women can be a pathway for Catholics to understand more fully the immensity and the richness of the mercy of God. Pope Francis had made the mercy of God the signal, theological, and spiritual centerpiece of his pontificate, teaching that mercy is the primary attribute of God in relation to men and women. Similarly, in the Quran, all of the 114 chapters but one begin by addressing God with the words Rahman and Rahim, both of which denote the mercy of God. As we Catholics wrestle with the implication of the meanings of God's mercy in our lives, encounters with the disciples of Islam can provide a vivid source of reflection, encouragement, and enrichment. Thirdly, until the promulgation of Dignitatis Humanae 50 years ago at the Second Vatican Council, Catholic teaching on religious freedom asserted that every nation had an obligation to establish Catholicism as the official state religion unless the religious diversity of the society made an establishment detrimental to social peace and harmony. The model in Catholic theology 50 years ago for the relationship between church and state was Franco's Spain. Religions other than Catholicism had no moral right to public recognition because, quote, error has no rights, unquote. As a result of these teachings, Catholics in the United States were the objects of scorn and discrimination. Even when John Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he had to defend himself against the charge that in a Kennedy presidency, it would be the Pope who would ultimately govern the United States. It is one of the great ironies of the history of Catholic doctrine that the very experience of religious freedom and diversity in the United States, which was suspect in Catholic teaching, constituted a major foundation for the reform of Catholic doctrine on religious liberty. Pointing directly to the religious flourishing in America in comparison with large parts of Europe, the leaders of the Church of the United States at the Council proposed that the American constitutional system provided a basic ordering of religion, society, and the state, which was fully compatible with Catholic teaching and Catholic freedom. For the Muslim community, like the Catholic community, the relationship of religion, society, and the state in America has been a source of reflection, development, and sadly, misunderstanding within the larger society. For Muslims as well as Catholics, the call of faith which comes from God is a sacred obligation of conscience which cannot be ignored or bypassed. At the same time, the Muslim community in the United States, like the Catholic community, generally finds in the constitutional order of the United States a wonderful framework for respecting religious liberty and the rights of government. A significant challenge to the Catholic community in the United States today is to walk with the Muslim community in their reflections upon the issues of religious liberty, society, and the state in contemporary America, in order to collaborate in identifying pathways, language, and strategies which will maximize religious freedom while safeguarding the legitimate and essential work of government. A major part of that accompaniment must be to address within the wider society distortions of Muslim theology and teaching on society and the state, because these distortions are just as devastating in the present day as the distortions of Catholic teaching on church and state, which were disseminated in American society in the 19th century. The final challenge to the Catholic community in the United States, arising from the anti-Islamic moment, is the need to forge an effective relationship with the Muslim community in America to witness to and fight for a future in the Middle East which embraces the vital presence and freedom of Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities of faith. One of the great beauties of the Quran is its respect for the peoples of the book, the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities. Say unto them, we believe in that which hath been revealed unto us and revealed unto you. Our God and your God is one, and unto him we surrender. Islam proclaims that God is the guardian of all the faithful. Thus they should not fear nor grieve. Yet in the Middle East, we witness to a reality in which people of all faiths are grieving and are filled with fear. And the root of their fear and grieving bears the imprint of religious conflict, as it does with the safety of so many Muslim refugees who are seeking safety in Europe. Refugees. It is a terrible wound to the Christian community throughout the world that their brothers and sisters in faith who have lived in Muslim lands for more than a millennium are being faced with extinction because of their faith. So too, it is a great tragedy for the Muslim community in the world to see their brothers and sisters in faith excluded from safety in Europe because of their faith. This final challenge to the Catholic community in the United States is in reality a challenge to both the Catholic and Muslim communities to walk in solidarity, witnessing, strategizing, and advancing public policy within the U.S. and within the Muslim world, to forge a secure future for all of the peoples of the book in the Middle East and throughout the world. The beautiful movie of Gods and Men portrays the story of a group of French Trappist monks who were murdered by extremists in Algeria in 1995. Their monastery was set on a mountain surrounded by a Muslim village in which the Trappists provided medical care. All around the monastery, extremist violence rages, killing off the moderate Muslim leaders of the community and threatening the monks as well. During the course of their wrenching reflections on whether the monks should stay or flee to safety in France, one of the Trappists is talking to a Muslim mother in the village, and he says to her, "We monks are like birds on a branch, not knowing whether to fly away or to stay." The woman responds to him, "No, we are the birds, and you are the branch. Without you, we will lose our footing." Let us as Catholics and Muslims work together to advance a vision of the Middle East and of the world which sees all of the peoples of the book, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, as both birds and branches in the great vision of the God who is the Father of us all.
Boo! 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 It's freedom of expression. It's my opinion. It's my opinion. It's a public meeting.
You're disturbing the rest of us.
Thank you very much, Bishop. I think we all appreciate it. We'll hear more when the questions come in. I particularly took to heart.
Here you have the cardinal. Thank you, Bishop. Very inspiring. And thank you, University of San Diego, Kroc Institute. We have experienced your work in peace building and conflict resolution. Thank you, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, through our Anthony Cirelli, and the Muslim leaders who have been very persistent and consistent for decades now in this world. I have to cut short some of the things, but let me go directly that Prophet Muhammad was born 570 years after Jesus Christ. He was born in Mecca, and after 40 years, he started getting revelations, and this was the beginning of his prophecy. This was something very unique. So when he got the first revelation, how many of you know who attested him first that it was coming from the right source, from the same source that the earlier prophets and messengers got from God? It was a Christian, the only Christian who lived in Mecca at that time, and he was the cousin of Prophet Muhammad's wife, Khadija. So he took him to Warqa bin Nawfal, and Warqa said that I attest that whatever experience you have, are you getting in terms of getting the revelation? This is the true revelation. So it took a Christian to confirm what the Prophet Muhammad was bringing new to the world. So we recognize the fact that the emergence of Islam was characterized by mutual recognition and cooperation between Muslims and Christians. On the one hand, Warqa bin Nawfal, the only Christian in Mecca, was the first to recognize the authenticity of Prophet's initial experience of receiving the divine revelation. On the other hand, a Christian king, Negus of Ethiopia, was the first ruler of a neighboring country to give asylum to Muslims when they were persecuted in their own hometown, Mecca. It's also a fact that from the beginning, Quran chapter 5, verse 82, Quran chapter 3, verse 13, praised Christians as the nearest to Muslims. Quran says, among the Christians, there are people who stand for the right. They deliberate on the signs of God all night and they prostrate to Him in adoration. They believe in God and in the day of judgment, they enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. They hasten to emulate all good works. They are the ranks of the righteous. But the second millennium, this was initial when Islam emerged, there was that kind of mutual understanding and support. But when the new millennium began, that is the second millennium, the second millennium between Muslims and Christians began on a negative note. When Pope Urban II in 1095 declared crusades against Muslims. This act helped to define the second millennium as the millennium of confrontation between Islam and Christianity. The crusades, which lasted for centuries, led to forms of slavery, brutal inquisition, wars of reconquista, colonial occupation of Muslim lands, and finally a bloody independence movement for the liberation of the occupied lands. Out of 57 Muslim countries, that there are only 57 Muslim countries that have more than 80% Muslim population. Out of 57 of these countries, 54 were at various points in their history under the direct European occupation that was sanctioned by Christian religious leaders. The long stretch of endless confrontation between the two faiths divided the world into a house of Islam and a house of Christianity. Such a divided world helped to establish mutually destructive attitudes and stereotypes that shaped our respective cultures and formed our individual consciences for centuries. Hence, the literature, poetry, arts, religious sermons reflected this hate and willful distortion of each other. Pope Urban II did not only declare a war against Islam, he announced that Prophet Muhammad was the Antichrist. Even the great poet like Dante depicted the prophet in the lowest part of the hell in his Divine Comedy. While Muslims did not reciprocate with the derogatory language against Christ, who is and has always been highly revered by Muslims as a prophet of God whose birth and life are miraculous. Nonetheless, the mutual cooperation, trust, and positive relationship was replaced by mistrust, hate between the two faith communities. During the last half of the 20th century, after the liberation of almost all occupied Muslim lands, there was slowly an improvement in that. So the Crusades millennium, at the beginning of a new era of understanding and recognition of the other. It was a new era now, a new millennium. It was something unprecedented in terms of expressing respect for Prophet Muhammad and Islam. This is what Nostra Aetate was, because it brought an end to that millennium. But the most critical positive development of this new relationship has been the reform of Catholic Church itself. The Second Vatican made certain radical changes in the way Church attempted to deal with the other faith groups, particularly Jews and Muslims. This was truly a rejection of the Crusades millennium and the beginning of a new era of understanding and recognition of the other. This new approach to Islam coincided with the emergence of a sizable Muslim community in the West. This changed the Crusades' division of two colliding worlds, with Muslims in the Muslim world and Christians in the Christian world. The Muslim world was always a home to Christian minorities, but now the West too became home of a vibrant Muslim community. So the West could not be termed now as the enemy of Islam in absolute terms. The globalization prepared the world for a new configuration of the East and the West. The West became as diverse in terms of race, color, and faith as Muslim world had been before. Now, this is where my concern is, that we have a millennium of literature, poetry, everything full of so much of hate. And with Nostra Aetate, we created a new direction and a new understanding. I will discuss later the Muslim Nostra Aetate, how we have been able to do the same thing. But the Nostra Aetate itself was a new beginning. But the problem where I am actually leading is that the emergence of ISIS after the recent death and destruction in the Arab world through wars, the terminology of Crusades era has come back to define the other. Did you get that? So we had made a new leap, but the language is still there. And there is a new situation where they have appropriated that language. They think that they are the ones who are now fighting the crusades that had been fought in the past. It's a very scary situation. When we analyze the language and the rant of the ISIS leaders, their announcements, the content of their newsletter, Dabiq, and their symbols, we see an extraordinary effort to revive and continue with the language of crusades. The Quran had recognized Christianity and Judaism as Abrahamic faiths interconnected with Islam. The dignified term to describe Christians and Jews was first time coined by the Quran when it called them Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book. This defined them as the members of a respectable scriptural faiths alongside with Islam. The word Christian or Ahlul Kitab is totally absent from the vocabulary of the ISIS. Every time they refer to their Christian victims, they call them crusaders. Have you watched that? The name of their newsletter is Dabiq, which is the Crusades era folklore. Which in the Crusades era folklore was associated with the final decisive battle between Crusaders and Muslims. they have taken the ownership of the vast traditions of Crusades era. They have taken charge of the literature, epic wars, songs, freedom chants, and all the lore of the Crusades in describing their mission. From the Philippines to Morocco, there have been bloody battles against the Christian colonial forces, the heroes of the wars, of independence, martyrs of freedom struggle, a long, rich history of resistance for independence and self-determination for the Muslim lands have been brought to life. So those of you who are aware of in Libya, Umar Mukhtar, we admire his role against the French occupation. But it ends there. But the ISIS has appropriated him. Similarly, other heroes who fought during the colonial time, if you read their writings, they are claiming them and are building their whole thing on as a continuation of that. The vast lore of historical experiences being misrepresented and misappropriated by the ISIS as part of an active crusade today. This is happening at a time when the Vatican has rejected this bloody history and is struggling to move forward toward cooperation and collaboration with Muslims around the world. I will have to cut short some of the things, but I hope that the message is clear. That it is a live crusade going on. It has its own logic. It has its own symbols and its own slogans. That's why if a lone young boy or girl is watching this, it makes sense to him. And the antidote to that is what we are doing today. What we have done in terms of Nostra Aetate, recognizing and building together. And this, the greatest thing is that while we were celebrating Nostra Aetate last year, 50th anniversary, we were also celebrating 52nd year anniversary of the emergence of Islamic community in North America. Islamic community of North America is the only community in the world that has lived side by side with the Christians in America. So our presence itself is an antidote against the ISIS philosophy that we are the products of a pluralist democracy, and we stand witness that there is nothing like crusades today, but they are on the other side. So did you get that? That's my worry. I was telling in the dialogue in the morning that I lose my sleep because I feel what we have achieved during these 50 years. Catholics, Christians, Muslims, people of different faiths in this country, it is certainly, on the one hand, this is the evidence, this is what we have to project to the rest of the world, that this is what we have achieved today. Crusades is no more there. The Christians are not after Muslims. For the first time, for the Muslim community, if they are properly educated about the Nostra Aetate, they should consider it as a fulfillment of the Quranic prophecy and will work closely together with Catholic community in the US and around the world to make this a common manifesto against extremists who are the products of the false premises that Christianity is still guided by Crusades philosophy. After all, the Quran celebrated religious pluralism as a divine gift and insisted that no one should be coerced to change one's religion. The Prophet was sternly warned in the Quran 10:99 not to expect people to follow him against their will. While we have been in face of the rising Islamophobia, we have received strong support here in America from the Catholics. In 2010, when a lone pastor in Florida was threatening to burn the Quran with utmost hate and malice, and when at the same time the hate against Muslims took the form of opposition to the building of the so-called Ground Zero Mosque in New York. And while several other Islamic centers were attacked and vandalized, it was that time that Catholic Conference of Bishops, along with Christians and Jewish denominations, came forward and rejected the anti-Muslim rhetoric. They declared that attack on Muslim places of worship will be considered as attack on all religions in America. A powerful campaign that called shoulder to shoulder with American Muslims, upholding American values against anti-Muslim sentiment. This campaign is steered by Christians and Jewish organizations, and funded by them. It is this support for Christians and Jews in America, for our community, and reinforced by our own Islamic commitment to protect minorities of other faiths living in the Muslim world, that has prompted us to take our outreach to Muslim countries where the minorities are under attack. Then I will discuss how we have had several projects in Muslim countries where we have been trying to help to understand that Christian minorities, their status, their treatment has to be changed. I have given some examples, our success in Tunisia, how for the first time an Islamic country adopted a constitution which recognizes citizenship for all. And then I have talked about the recent conference we had in Morocco, where 250 Muslim scholars from all over the world and our interfaith partners from here attended there, when Muslims finally accepted the fact that in the 21st century, the only way to organize Muslim states is to have equal citizenship to both Muslims and people of all faiths. So, these are examples that have helped us to reconnect with our original sources of Islam and away from some of the medieval conventions that may not reflect the original purpose of our jurisprudence. American Muslim experience of living in a pluralist society has prompted these new approaches. We can discuss during the question and answer what kind of things we have from our side amended in our day-to-day life. For example, when we were raising our daughters in this country, we would not have allowed them to drive cars. You know that. Because in Saudi Arabia, Muslim women are not allowed to drive a car. If Saudi Arabia was our model, then American Muslim girls would not have been allowed to do that. But these jurists had to make a decision. They said that we have clear indication in the life of the Prophet when he advised that every parent should train their daughters and sons to be good camel drivers. So naturally, we took it seriously, and we didn't have the camels here. So there's a long list what we have achieved in terms of understanding Islam in this context without in any sense compromising on things. So, for example, some Muslim immigrants coming from countries like Sudan, Egypt, and Somalia thought that when they came here earlier, when we were starting the building of the Islamic community, thought that the prevailing custom of genital mutilation in their countries had its roots in Islam. And therefore it was an Islamic obligation for them to continue to practice in their new homeland. ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, was clear from the beginning that genital mutilation may have been an old practice in some African countries. It had nothing to do with Islam. There was no basis in the Quran. And it is not practiced in any other country other than those 3-4 countries. We took an educated position against it and convinced our members that this was to be discontinued. We celebrated our success on this account and hope our example here will make our advocacy against it more convincing and effective elsewhere in other parts of the Muslim world. Muslim community in the United States is involved directly and indirectly in fighting against human trafficking and so on. Nostra Aetate and the Islamic practices of American Muslims have clearly identified natural allies between the Abrahamic faiths and other religious communities. This is the shape of new millennium of alliance building for common values of mutual respect and recognition. All faiths are striving to promote those divine values enshrined in our sacred texts and scriptures, so that those who exploit them for reinforcing hate, extremism, violence, and instability are identified as the enemies of all faiths. Thanks to Nostra Aetate, as a response to our collective prayers for centuries, we need to work together to promote this experience and this vision with full energy and resources. Here and around the world, we propose that we should be able to create an action plan to get all churches, Islamic centers, synagogues, other places of worship, educational institutes, and other agencies involved to work extensively in promoting the new agenda for a new millennium. That's where we are.
Boo! Boo!
Can you mind your manners?
Boo!
You are very disruptive and very rude.
Boo!
I'll take a picture. You have permission to take a picture of me. You need to stop it.
You're on YouTube,
You
lady.
remember?
You have no
You're on
permission to
YouTube.
take a picture of me.
Copernicus.
And
I
you
don't
need to
need it.
stop
You remember Galileo? You remember Bruno? When they first said that the earth was round, they were persecuted, right? Catholics did not accept that earth was round. How many Catholics today believe that earth is not round? This is exactly what I want to understand from you. How did you succeed in convincing every Catholic everywhere that earth is not round? Earth is round. It's a big task. Today we have a similar task, where every Catholic around the world will understand and know that Muslims are their best allies in fighting here and overseas all injustices, all prejudices and discrimination. How do we do that? How do we together fight against ISIS? And how do we promote that we are not ISIS, ISIS is someone else, and our collective achievements these 50 years specially qualify us to fight against them. So you have to tell me, how do we do that? Thank you.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
Thank you, Dr. Saeed and Bishop McElroy. It's a privilege for me to share the stage with two such influential peace builders. And we are delighted to honor your work tonight and hopefully tackle that very good question that you left us with. I want to take this opportunity to put into context the remarks for those of us living here in San Diego. So I want to share a couple of numbers with you. And to refer back to something that Father Headley said in his opening remarks, we here at the School of Peace Studies have been very concerned about the rise of violent extremism around the world, the rise in radicalization in some of our own communities, and the rise in Islamophobia that we see is a dangerous combination And after San Bernardino, we began saying, what can we begin to do proactively to strengthen our interfaith, our extremely diverse communities here in San Diego, so that the next time a crisis happens nearby or here, we have some infrastructure in place to prevent that kind of polarization that Dr. Saeed was talking about. So a little bit of context. Last year, in 2015, there were 170 reported threats against Muslims in San Diego. The year before that, in 2014, the FBI reported a reduction in lots of different types of hate crimes, anti-Jewish crimes, anti-Black crimes, anti-Hispanic crimes, even crimes against the LGBTQ community. But there was an 8% increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes. The question we are asking is, how do we keep our communities resilient in the face of threats from violent extremism and the fear and the anger that those threats produce? So I want to just explain that term resilience. Resilience means strength and adaptability in the face of disruption, and it is a part and a function of every living thing and every system, a coral reef, our electrical grid, a river basin. So every system, no matter what it looks like, has the qualities of resilience in it. It's just part of how we are put together. But then no matter what the system, there are two characteristics, for the sake of time, that are particularly important to resilience. And the first of those characteristics is diversity. So for example, the diversity of our global ecosystem is what makes it resilient, the diversity of species of plants and animals, which is why you will hear very concerned scientists talking about the extinction of lots of species and how that affects the resilience of the entire planetary ecosystem. The World Wide Web, because of the diverse placement of servers geographically, the World Wide Web is more resilient to disruption. So every resilient system has an element of diversity built into it, including human communities. Now, diversity is a great strength, or it can be when it comes to human communities. Our chances to innovate and to discover new things and to come up with creative solutions to complex problems are greater when information flows freely in a diverse community of people. But here is our challenge. In San Diego, our community, our city, our county has gotten more diverse, but we are still living in highly segregated neighborhoods. Okay, so diversity only works towards resilience if we harness it, and we do that by creating spaces to work on interventions around divisive issues and link communities together with each other. So I want to throw out there two more challenges for us to think about as we transition into more of a back and forth between our speakers and the audience. In these times when real security concerns are complicated by divisive rhetoric from politicians and other thought leaders and outright hate speech in some cases, one challenge is, how do we encounter the authentic other? The others who are not in this room tonight or may not be in this room. The military, guns rights advocates, conservatives, people who are deeply concerned about immigration and what it means for American society. So how do we engage with the authentic other and not just ourselves? The second challenge is ensuring that women have the opportunity to make meaningful exercise influence in those encounters. I want to share a piece of, my professor hat on, and share a piece of research with you from the world of peace studies. Research shows that when women participate in peace negotiations, they tend to frame the access to justice systems. In other words, things that drive violent conflict and things that drive violent extremism. And so they have a really positive impact on peace negotiations when they are involved at the level that they can set the agenda or influence the agenda. So a dialogue table is not a negotiating table, but they're similar. And at both spaces, we are discussing issues of security. So I think because women tend to see security issues through a broader lens, the conversation when they're included can shift in interesting and very important ways. So with that, I'll close with a quote from a woman who inspires me, Helen Keller, who said, "Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it." So I want to invite Dr. Saeed and Bishop McElroy back to the stage to help us reflect on the spiritual and emotional and physical resources that we can use in our own overcoming and our own building of resilience. Why don't we give them another round of applause?
Woo! Woo!
So I have the prerogative of asking the first question because I'm on stage and sitting in the middle, and I'm going to take that prerogative, but then I want to open it up right away to you, because I know you have lots of questions of your own. And so you spoke to spatial segregation or social segregation and how that prevents encounters and real friendships between Catholics and Muslims. And I've just argued that we need authentic spaces for encounter. And one of the things that occurs to me is that another type of social segregation happens because we work in hierarchies. And my question is, and this comes from someone I think who is more often engaged at the level of the grassroots and recognizes that the national dialogue is an exemplary example of a meeting of faith communities over 20 years to build relationships, to build trust, to counter narratives. So I was wondering if you could share with us how you translate your work at this level, which is almost an elite level, and it's a very important one, down to the grassroots communities where young people and neighbors and schools are natural entry points for doing some of this peace-building work.
Well, that was one of the questions we were really discussing at some length in the dialogue today. How do we make our work, which is in a certain sense, theological dialogue is an elite enterprise at one level. But the very question we're struggling with today, how do we make it real for people as a whole so that it takes root in their lives, so this dialogue has meaning? And we were talking about strategies of how we do that. That really took up most of the afternoon. It is precisely the question. That's why I think the most important strategy, and the one I was trying to point to in terms of the social segregation piece, doesn't occur with people like me. It occurs in trying to encourage people as a whole in our society to get to know some Muslims or Catholics, get to know Muslims, Muslims get to know Catholics. I really fear that the reality is, as I said, that most Catholics don't know Muslim on any significant level of friendship with Muslims, to where they share it a deep way. And I think there are all these reasons for it. But I could be wrong on that, but I really believe that's the case. And to me, that's why it's so important for Catholics to try to seek out and develop and nurture relationships across religions, to understand them better, because that is the best antidote to the sort of prejudice that is roiling in our society. Because once you understand that your neighbor, your co-worker, you see the difficulties, dilemmas, and joys of life through their eyes as a Muslim believer, and also as a human being, then it makes it much more difficult to caricature that person and put them in a box and to make them a threat to you. So I think most of what our discussion is, it's really not a dialogue among us, but it's a dialogue that's meant to be a spur to people in all levels of our faith communities to come to understand one another better. But that's why the Pope keeps talking about this personal encounter. That means you bond with someone. That doesn't mean you just have an intellectual discussion. It doesn't mean you have a theoretical. It doesn't mean you have a momentary encounter. It means you bond with someone on a certain level, so that the Pope said it in that ancient way, you walk in their shoes for a while, and then you see how it looks. Then you understand how these caricatures of faith on both sides are so ill-conceived and distorted.
I asked this straightforward question: how did you make every Catholic believe that Earth is round? Right? There's no one Catholic you could bring him and he would say, no, it's not round. So that's exactly what we have to do, because I have given you the history of last whole millennium. It's here that we are breaking that history, that for the first time, you have in many cities a Catholic church and an Islamic center side by side. You have Muslims and Catholics working in different contexts together. It's amazing what is happening today in America between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The number of projects that are going on. Catholic women, Muslim women. Catholic youth, Christian youth, Muslim youth. At every level these are happening. But these things have to be much more intensified. And they have to be reported, they have to be publicized. Our good news is not being publicized. So the problem, it's an old problem. I mean, who is doing what? If someone says something in the caves of Afghanistan, it becomes the front page news in America. But when we bring together people and they give their statements and so on. So interesting thing is, every year we have a convention during the Labor Day weekend. Muslim, Islamic Society of North America, and same with Islamic Circle of North America. So I talked to you about the shoulder to shoulder with American Muslims against anti-Muslim bigotry. Catholic Conference of Bishops is behind it, National Conference of Churches is behind it, several different denominations of Christians, Orthodox, and several denominations of Jews are behind it. And I want to recognize Dr. Tinnaman here. He was, why don't you stand up, the tallest Christian leader who was the former Secretary General of the National Council of Churches, and he was behind that wonderful project. Now, we know that we have to achieve the ultimate goal of collaborating and building that kind of understanding. So 2 years ago, we thought that we have these programs going on every day. But what about these young seminarians? So we created a scholarship, special scholarship last year, that we should sponsor 20 young seminarians from different seminaries who are pastors and priests in the making. So first time we had these 24 seminarians in our convention. With lost in this ocean of Muslims here. So they didn't have to go to Iran or Afghanistan or India. They had everything there. But then, first year we had a separate program for them, while as the program was going on for the convention itself. But next year, last year, we had 24 of them, new. But this time they said, we don't want to have separate program. Let them attend every session that the Muslims are had, every panel discussion, every lecture, every interfaith dialogue, whatever is going on. Because along with this, when we have this 20,000, 30,000 Muslims together, we have about 10,000, 15,000 youth who have their own program, Muslim Students Association. So this year it was amazing when they went back, because they had been exposed now what Muslims are thinking, what are their concerns, how are they addressing this different issue, and so on. You cannot imagine the number of blogs that each one wrote about this unique experience of having lived in a Muslim ocean in America. It was amazing.
So, and that's how you get the visibility. What a great idea. So in the spirit of real dialogue, I want to invite you to share comments as well as questions, because I think that there's a lot of knowledge in this room concerning the question that these folks are grappling with. So with that, I will...
I fail to say that Dr. Kinnaman lives here. Dr. Kinnaman lives here in San Diego. I forgot to say it. He is retired from the National Council of Churches after having contributed such immensely in that. So he is here now in your neighborhood.
Good evening, our guests. My name is Agatha. I'm a grad student from Kroc School of Peace Studies, and I'm from Nigeria. I want to direct my question to our speakers, especially Dr. Said. Yeah, we've talked about the ISIS, and that is what is in the air everywhere we go. My question is this. You know, as a Muslim scholar and also as Muslim community, what more do you think you can do? Because I still believe that the major responsibility lies with the Muslim. These people are terrorists, we know. But they are terrorists who have decided to adopt maybe the method of the Crusaders you mentioned earlier. Yeah, but Crusader, all of us join hands together to denounce it. Not just denouncing it, but to disarm it. And it is no more in existence today, especially the Catholics that started it. You know, so now, as a Muslim, how do you think we are going to, you know, join forces together to stop what is going on in the Middle East? Because the responsibility is more. I talk with an experience from Nigeria. You know, when you talk about the Boko Haram, I can start my sermon from now till the next millennium. It wouldn't make any difference. But if a Muslim scholar talks, the kind of person they respect, it will make somehow a little difference. So I'm not trying to say that it is not our responsibility, it is, but I still believe that the major responsibility lies with the Muslim community. And when we see this, it will even encourage us to do more. You know, thank you very much.
I mean, it is our responsibility to project Islam in a right way. It is our collective responsibility to fight against this kind of situation that has developed, unfortunately. I mean, situation in Nigeria, the situation in Afghanistan, Pakistan, all over the world. I mean, Turkey, there was a bomb in Turkey today. So there is no country which is safe in this situation. Living in Washington, I know billions of dollars are being spent on one thing, that is to not to allow ISIS to have a base in Syria and Iraq. And they will do that. I mean, with might, with the allies together, with their military power, they will take away from them sometime soon the region that they are controlling. But the real challenge is not only to take away, that has to be done, there's no doubt. It is that philosophy, it is that ideology that they have developed. And that ideology does not need a space now. It has the virtual space. People in Indonesia, people in Turkey, people in Germany have access to these things. And the result is, whatever is happening every day, it, just like we study it and reject it, they build on it. The other day I was reading New York Times, so the correspondent was saying that I wanted to have an interview with this mullah, sheikh there. So he gave me time for an interview in this What's his name? Osama bin Laden library of his mosque. Did you get it? And I was shocked. I said, Osama bin Laden was killed some time back. But it looks that in that capacity, in this new ideology, these people are not killed. Their teachings, their lives, their whatever they have done are preserved. They become fodder of this. And it is not now only Nigerian extremists are fed on Nigerian extremism, but now they have a global extremism available to them. Whatever writings. I was just discussing with one of our brothers here about one of the scholars who became famous in Pakistan, Dr. Israr Ahmad. And he would be a normal person. We would never think that he would ever have anything to do with terrorists. But then he wrote books about how to establish Khilafah. He wrote books about how to establish an Islamic State. And then he died several years ago. But I was shocked to see that his books have been translated. They are available for ISIS. Did you get my point? So many of these people, like the worst person I would have thought was that dirty bomber, shoe bomber. Do you remember? We were happy that he was killed. But he is projected there with such a respectful name that this was the person who became Muslim and rejected this Crusades mentality and so on. So that's why I'm saying that this ideology has become a global ideology. To fight against it, all of us will have to contribute. Muslim community in particular will have to come up with an understanding, with teachings, with appreciation of the institutions that have helped us to grow in these 50 years. What is the secret of Muslims in America prospering here? What is the secret that I have raised my children and grandchildren who are committed Muslims? Because there is freedom of religion in this country. We need to advocate that in other countries so that in those countries as well, we can raise generations of Muslims, Christians who have commitment to the safety, security, prosperity of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and other countries. So we have become, in that sense, a model, and we need to project that model. You need to help us in this. If that's not happening, then no one in the Muslim world will be able to fight these things.
That's what you guys
Good evening. My name is Jill Summer, and I'm on the Women Peacemaker Advisory Committee. And I've been coming to a lot of these lectures for about 6 years now, and one of the things that is always discussed is the importance and effectiveness of grassroots organizations. So thank you, speakers, for talking about what you're doing from a grassroots standpoint. But I would like to go to something that Dr. Carpenter brought up, and that is getting women to the dialogue table. So I would like to ask both you, Bishop, and Dr. Sayed, what steps are being taken in both the Muslim and Catholic faiths to allow women the same positions within the religious hierarchy, i.e. priests, imams, whatever it might be in the Muslim community? Thank you.
It's wonderful to work with Catholics, but sometimes we may go too far. You know that our organization is a democratic organization. We have elections every 2 years. We have one of the presidents, Dr. Muzamil Siddiqui, here. He was elected before 9/11 for 4 years, and he was our president. So we have a council, this election council. People send their nominations. When there's election, they send their nominations. As you know, I mean, it's American, this Constitution. So 10 years ago, our nomination committee got nomination of a person for presidency. And this person was a good scholar of Islam. This person had written several books about Islam. This person was respected as a Muslim leader and so on. But this person had a problem. What do you think was the problem? No, it was she. This person was a woman. So we have never had a Muslim woman heading an Islamic organization. So it would happen if we were in some other country. If we were 20 years, 30 years back, we would have said that just reject her, it's all right. But this generated a debate. Should Muslims have a woman leading an American Islamic organization or not? So we deliberated on that. We found that there is clearly precedent in the life of the Prophet himself and in the early stages of Islam. That Prophet's wife was a businesswoman, Khadija. Actually, he was hired by her. So, if that is true, if there could have been a Muslim woman who has an entrepreneur, then what is holding us from having a Muslim woman running our organization? We delved deeper, we found out that other wife of Prophet, Aisha, she survived the Prophet. And most of the Islamic teachings later, Islamic education, we learned from her. Because she was able to deliver it after the Prophet had passed away. So you can have an Islamic leader, Islamic scholar, who can be Islamic as well as a scholar and a leader. So therefore, we decided that in America, we will have the first Muslim woman leading the organization. You get that? Because nowhere in the Muslim world today, none of the organizations, Islamic organizations, is different if you have, for example, the woman prime minister in Pakistan or something. But this is something different. It is having an Islamic organization with a woman president. So what that meant was, it was a direct signal to our Islamic centers, to our other organizations, and by now, majority of Islamic institutions, centers have now at least some Muslim women in their boards and so on. So it is a new day in that, a new millennium that I was telling you. But we are not doing it as a deviation from Islam. But we are trying to understand what can be done and what cannot be done, and in order to keep our this legitimacy and credibility.
Now you have to follow that.
I'm just worried in light of the collaboration and what Dr. said that I'm going to have to learn how to drive a camel. So.
I taught my daughters who were born here.
That's right, yeah. I would say in the Catholic community, you asked, what is the group within the church that most effectively witnesses on the ground as an act of conscience to the pursuit of peace and peace building? It would be the religious women, the nuns. And that they historically and in the contemporary moment serve in their identity as religious. You know, they're the founders of this school. You know, and but so if you're asking where in the life of the church does that occur, I would say an unswerving witness to peace building within the Catholic community has been and continues to be, and in a sense, very real sense, I'd say, the conscience of the Catholic community on issues of peace building are in the lives and the hearts and the souls of the nuns, of the religious women, all through our history in this country. That would be, it's not the same answer as you're giving, it's not, but it is the same reality in the sense of not, as you know, women religious have been deeply committed both to peace, but in particular the whole question of human trafficking now in these recent days. I think there's no group in our society that more effectively witnesses to that issue than the Catholic women religious at this point. So there are conscience on that, there are formators on that, and there are catalysts on the ground on that. That would be my thinking.
I want to just have one observation. What we have done is...
Use the mic.
What we did was, we said that women can run an organization. They are our leaders. What had happened over 1,000 years during this time, they have thought that a leader, a head of a state, is also head of the military. All right? Sorry, a head of the state or head of the military is also an imam. He is leading the prayer. So therefore they thought that since women don't lead the prayer in a mixed audience, therefore they cannot be also the leader. So we said we separate these two things. Someone like this Dr. Ingrid Mattson, who was our first Muslim woman president. So she was running the whole thing. But then she doesn't have to, in specific, it's a very specific thing in Islam, that when men and women are praying together, and you know how we pray, we bow, we kneel, there are so many different gestures. So in that kind of situation, it would not be appropriate to have women in the front or so on. So it's an internal adjustment, but then it should not deter us, stop us from giving the bigger role to women and the responsibility in terms of running the affairs of the community. So it's interesting, my daughter, she's a good writer, she writes sermons, but the sermons are given by who? The Muslim imams give sermons, but they are written by a Muslim woman.
We're going to move to the next question, but I want to comment just briefly that I think this is a really great example of how evolutions in the way that things work take place, but without deviating, as you said, from the most important principles of the religion. You just dive deeper and you ask, what's really our history here? And in terms of evolutions, I mean, both of you have spoken to changes over time in the faith traditions and how they operate, and maybe you're a little bit ahead of the curve here. Maybe. So, I've just been informed that we're out of time for questions, but please join me in giving our guests of honor another round of applause.
Bishop McElroy, Dr. Carpenter, and Dr. Saeed, thank you so much for the inspiration. In a time in our country when everyone wants to divide us, you brought us back to our motto, out of many one, and it's very hopeful after your conversation this evening. I know we can continue it on for hours. We are going to provide the opportunity that does bring us together, and that is food and opportunity for reception outside, so I hope that you will join us. And again, let's give them a round of applause.